The Small Bow.
Yes, not the small bowel, as it's been called before.
I am Carl. I am an addict alcoholic, and among other things, my sobriety date is August 22nd, 2014. And you are
AJ Delirio, sober July 15th, 2016. Yeah, and sober from alcohol, drugs, but also qualify as all the things.
All the above. And so this is SoberPod.
Soberpod.com. Yeah, SoberPod, keep it authentic, no facades. If it's real, then you know it's ours. Welcome.
SoberPod is a podcast dedicated to the idea that one addict or alcoholic helping another is crucial to building a life in recovery. We are not professionals or scholars and do not speak for any other groups or organizations. And the opinions expressed in this episode are strictly those of the individual. And with that said, if you guys are listening, there is hopefully it's a familiar voice to some people, but to me, it's a very familiar voice. Over like the last month, I've been binging AJ Delirio's podcast, The Small Bow. And so I just want to welcome AJ. Welcome.
Thank you.
And just to backfill and to get the elephant out of the room, I know it has to be said, and I almost don't want to say this shit because I just think that it's stupid. But either way, can I back? I need to backfill in for the listeners.
Yeah, go ahead.
Know how I found it.
Go ahead.
So AJ Delirio, he was a former journalist, media executive / known for his controversial role in editor-in-chief at Gawker and Deadspin. Later, as the founder of The Small Bow, of course, which is what we're talking about now. AJ Delirio gained notoriety, and I hate to say that word notoriety because it just sounds infamous. But while he was at Gawker, for publishing high-profile stories, including the infamous Hulk Hogan sex tape, which
you just used infamous there.
Yeah. And so
after all that, being kind to me and just like that, and you threw it in there anyway.
Well, it's coming. It's coming. And so you had to file for bankruptcy, and you were personally named in the lawsuit, and you were just a central figure to that trial. Which, by the way, if you look up AJ Delirio on Google, and you'll see him like at the witness stand and stuff like that, and it's just like devastating. So it was a very public fall from grace. I would say, Delirio entered. You entered rehab, began your recovery journey. You later founded The Small Bow in 2020. Is that right? Was it
2018?
Oh, 2018. And it's a newsletter, of course, around addiction, trauma, sobriety, you name it, like any other topics. And I mean, and honestly, I really appreciate it. I don't know, how other people have received it, but I know for me, I really grew fond of it, and I look forward to the future episodes. That's for sure.
Thank you so much.
So I want to make sure that people know how I found you, which is, I didn't find you because of any of those things. I didn't know shit about Hulk Hogan.
Sure.
I didn't know anything about your background. I know nothing about you before I looked for, I was looking for topics to do because my co-host left, and she had a baby, and it was all good stuff. And
how dare she?
How dare she have a child? And so I was looking for just topics, and one of my interests is Stoicism. And you did an episode at the Daily Stoic with Ryan Holiday.
Sure
I don't know
did.
when it was, and I maybe it was like 2020 or 2021. I don't know.
Around there, yeah.
And then so I of course was listening to that. There wasn't a lot of Stoicism in it necessarily, but there was definitely a lot of AJ Delirio, right? And I got where you had utilized it on a personal level,
Sure.
For your recovery and that kind of a thing. And so, but then after listening, it mentioned The Small Bow. So I'm like, okay. And I did exactly the problem of, I looked up The Small Bow. And so I'm like, what is this bow thing? And then of course I went and I started listening to the podcast, which I went all the way back to episode 1. So, dear listeners, if you're listening, please do yourself a favor. Go all the way back to episode 1 and start from there and it's totally a binge worthy, beautiful. I really, like I say, I can't share it enough, and I can't talk about it enough at this point. You're my new obsession. So
thank you.
yeah.
Weird,
so,
but thanks.
Well, but I've been doing this a while too.
No,
right?
I get it.
Yeah. So you kind of when people are doing it honestly, and those kinds of things. So I wrote to AJ, and of course, he agreed. I think it took me a while to get here, but yeah, he agreed, and here we are. So I guess what I'm really more curious about is for other people to know too, because I already know all the background. I've already watched listened to all the podcasts and that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
talk to me about the turning point, or your bottom. And again, I even listened to you on Dopey, right? Which I'm sorry that episode happened. I don't really appreciate Dopey. I never have. And so
I like Dave very much. We get along outside of Dopey very well. I mean, I consider him a really good friend.
Oh, good.
But I did that early in, I guess, maybe 2019, something
2019,
like that.
Yeah.
And, to be fair, I mean, when people come into interviewing me and their intro to me is the trial, or Gawker and Deadspin, it's a different conversation. I understand why it has to happen in some places, because I mean that's Googleable, right?
Yeah.
But I do, I mean, how it was in early sobriety and early promotion for the newsletter. I'm still figuring out who I'm supposed to be publicly right now, and I describe a lot of those first 2 years after the trial as like having an asterisk next to my name. Like I felt like I needed to qualify that along with my sobriety, right?
Yeah.
But I was trying to get sober a long time before any of that stuff happened.
Yeah.
So the trial wasn't really a bottom. I mean, those are called trapdoor bottoms, right? The ones before that. Think you're. So I was around 4 or 5 months sober when I was in the courtroom. But not very emotionally sober. Like I acted like I was on a court card, kind of, that I was being grounded, not knowing exactly what was to come with that trial, because I kind of went into it a little unprepared, as you may notice if you read anything about it, but thinking that this was going to be settled on the courthouse steps, right? That this was never something that was going to gain the momentum that it did and become, covered in the way it was covered for around 2 weeks.
Infamously covered. Yes.
Infamously covered. But yeah, I think most people knew that I was a drug addict and an alcoholic and a guy that was prone to ruining things. Let's say that. And obviously I was in this very intense situation and not very stable. Right. I think that everyone that was on both sides recognized that, for better or for worse. I mean, the trial didn't ruin my life in any way, shape or form. I was a disaster waiting to happen.
You were already doing that work before.
Before. Yeah. I mean, I started I went to my first outpatient when I was 18. Not really because of drugs or alcohol. I had to kind of fake that in order to get to rehab, mostly because of depression, but I couldn't say I was depressed at that point. I don't know how old you are, but I mean,
too old.
I'm 50, right? So, I grew up in a Reagan 80s household with a Republican father, and mental health was not a thing that you talked about at that point, right? But I was deeply depressed and didn't know how to express that. So the way I did was to drink a lot of booze from the liquor cabinet and say I needed help. And I ended up in a rehab facility. It didn't take, obviously, but I knew I'd be back. I don't know why. I think I had an early inkling that me and substances were not going to get along. But I also didn't know how to manage my feelings, especially the bad ones, especially the restless ones, especially the ones that were dark, right? I didn't like feeling different, but I knew I did. I knew, and it was weird because I had plenty of situations. I had friends, I had girlfriends. I didn't feel like an outcast in any sort of way. But, and I still to this day, I feel very lonely, feel very restless, I feel very strange, I feel very ill-equipped to handle some things. I always feel like I missed some sort of test, right?
There was instructions that were handed out, and you weren't there when that happened, right?
Clearly, yeah. And then you end up in a courtroom in Florida with like a former WWE champion staring down at you.
It's
You're like,
so
what the fuck?
surreal. I can't even imagine it.
I mean, it was. I mean, but my one joke to anybody in recovery is like it was fourth step dinner theater was the whole entire courtroom process. But I knew probably in my mid-20s, once I tried coke, that was going to be a real problem for me. Not in the way that I was going to spend all my money and lose my job and lose my things like that. Just in a way that it brought out the worst in me, but I thought it brought out the best in me, right? I think a lot of people who have messed around with that drug know exactly what I'm talking about. But I couldn't find my footing. When things are good, I drank a lot. When things are bad, I drank a lot, or I partied a lot, or whatever, or I just, would be in relationships and then just completely torpedo them just to feel something, sort of stuff like that. And, I didn't know how to help myself. I tried therapy. I had a very nice therapist starting in 2010, 2011, when I started to get a lot of notoriety for the work I was doing at Deadspin and Gawker, because I didn't know how to handle that part. Plus, I hated myself, right? And I hated what I was doing. I hated the fact that I was, getting interviewed in GQ and having HBO Real Sports come around. As well.
There's pictures of you like sitting on the toilet or something with a microphone.
And I was
holding a cup of coffee, smoking a cigarette.
That was a cool one. I like that one. But the thing was, I was waiting for that moment to turn into the thing I wanted, to the career that I wanted. And I didn't know exactly what that was, but I knew it wasn't just being, editor and asshole chief, whatever I was at that point. Yeah. I didn't know how to get out of it either. And also, I mean, anybody who's been in media or a creative, endeavor knows that type of notoriety and publicity is pretty rare, right? So I was just like, oh, this has to be a good thing, right? But why do I feel terrible about it? And then I broke up with the woman that I was living with and was going to leave Deadspin. And then, my boss kind of intervened and gave me Gawker to stick around. Which was great, kind of my dream job in a lot of ways. I mean, kind of when I was in, early Lower East Side, 2003, 2004 sort of media world, Gawker was the place that everyone wanted to be. And even if it took 9 years to get there, I was still very much proud to be like at the head of the snake there on that operation. But I was out of control. I mean, I was doing a lot of Adderall, a lot of blow, and it was also because I was successful, I was getting away with it, right? Nobody's calling HR on me.
Yeah,
right?
No, I had the same deals. I was good at what I did, and then that allowed me to get by on a lot of different things.
Can you imagine doing that now? Right? I mean.
No, we'd be straight to court. Like we would not have jobs. Yeah.
Well, it's strange to me to look back I keep using strange a lot. I'm still bad at this podcast thing. Obviously, I'm working through it.
Dude, it just works.
But when how much I had to ingest substance-wise in order to feel good, not knowing that it was making me feel bad the whole entire time, right? And I think that that's something that most people struggle with. Is figuring out that all of the things that are bringing you joy at this point, when it comes to drugs or alcohol, are not working the way you hoped they would. Right, little by little, they're chipping away parts of you that are good parts.
But we think that it's working. But it's like it's tamping down the bad stuff, but it also tamps down the good stuff too.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
That's so. I don't see that part. I never saw that part. I always thought this is just going to have to be how I live because it works. So,
dude, I mean, when you say how you live, and that's the part that I remember. Especially in 2012 or 2013, I was just like, oh, I'm just one of those special people who can handle this. Mm-hmm. I'm a high functioning.
Yeah.
I'm in that club, right?
I would always say that too.
Well, I also thought that because I was so public with my recreational drug use, that meant I was okay, right? I wasn't hiding it. So... That's not the problem, right?
It's amazing what people will let you get away with in just outright public.
I'm not denying it. Isn't denial one of those things that I'm not
I would tell people I drink medicinally.
Jeez.
And then my social circles, my business circles, and everything else, everybody accepted that was exactly who they were dealing with. People would pour me from meeting to the cab to the hotel, and then prop me up for the presentation, as long as I was awake and And then after that, they knew what was coming. They had to pull me out of the bar, pour me into my hotel, pour me back to the cab, and pour me back home. That's exactly. But as long as they all kind of got what they wanted, right, which is propping me up, and I did all the fun things for the presentation. Right. I did my job, and then I was good. They viewed it as now it's his wife's problem.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely works like that. Hey, tell me, I don't want to get too far into the backlog here, or the drunkalogs, but so when you go into the last time when you go into
rehab,
what was different this time, and how did it? I know. So you said you were sober during. The trial, I guess?
early sobriety. Yeah.
So what happened there? What was different this last time?
I remember having a lot of trouble that entire summer of 2015. I think that most people knew that I was headed someplace, or I needed to head someplace. There was nothing that was working. I was going. I used to say that a lot. My drug of choice was up and sideways, right? Mm-hmm. Where I needed something to kind of build me, Coke, Adderall, Molly, whatever, and then I needed the Xanax to cut me off, and then so I can function, right? Mm-hmm. So I was really getting into pills, and I needed to fix that. So I went to a facility in North Jersey for 9 days for a taper. And I went in, and I remember them with the urine sample, because I don't know if you went to rehab, but they have those samples where they can recognize every single thing that's in your system at that point. And there was a lot, right? There was whatever was, I remember weed. I remember there was Molly. I remember there was blow.
You just went down the alphabet.
I remember there was Adderall, Viagra at that point. This is how else was it going to function? But yeah, and I remember being proud of that. I was just like, man, I am special. Look at me. Mm-hmm. I'm 41 years old and just killing it. right now.
Look what I can do.
Yeah, exactly. And I went there for 9 days. And because I had pretty good insurance at the time, I got a private room because obviously that's what you do to heal. And I isolated and I smoked cigarettes and I did push-ups in my room and I tried to read the challenging books that I brought with me. But I was 9 days felt like enough, right? Mm-hmm. It felt like forever. And then on the discharge day, one of the technicians there said, "Okay, well, where are we going next?" I was like, "Home, obviously."
Yeah,
just like
I'm done.
I was like, I've been here 9 days.
I'm
man.
good.
I've got life back. I don't know about you guys, but I've got a very important life. I've got a media company to run. Do you know what kind of person that I do? There are people that
know who I am.
Yeah, I raised a lot of money to run this thing, and this is just like a tune-up, right? Mm-hmm. I will never be back here again. And
just came here to rest my nerves.
I used to read about like Ron Wood used to go to some rehab for like 30, 60 days or something like that. Just to dry out, right? And, in the sun, pet horses, whatever, right? But I think in my head, that's what I thought I was doing. I was like, hey, I could do this every 3 months. Just come here, they give you a bunch of Librium and you nap and like get to smoke and you have people come from outside facilities and they talk to you and they give you pamphlets and you're fine. But it never occurred to me that I would ever have to go back to rehab again. I said, I'm just going to smoke pot from here on in.
Sure.
I'm going to become a pot guy, even though I'm not really a pot guy. That wasn't working too well. It took about 3 weeks.
You did try it? You did try the marijuana maintenance program or what?
Yeah. And I drank the tincture because it wasn't working fast enough. So they give you a little eyedropper. You're supposed to put it in things. Yeah. I was drinking it straight.
Treated like shots.
Man. Because I missed so much. I remember missing it. That lonely sort of feeling of like, oh, there's no more joy in my life. Now, how am I ever going to access the joy that I felt or the contentment that I felt when I was doing drugs? It feels like I'm grounded, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no fun. I'm going to lose all my friends. Mm-hmm. I'm going to lose all of my creative powers, right?
Oh, I did that too, by the way.
It seems very common. I believe that people who have this malady or disease, whatever you like to call it, really believe that the thing that is killing them is helping them the most, right? Mm-hmm. So I was definitely in that club, but I remember going. I had a bar that I went to constantly in Williamsburg, and I was so proud of how I'd adopted that place. That I'd finally found the place where I can just walk in at any hour of the day, and the bartender knew my name, and they would let me play my songs, and I was allowed to smoke there, and I could order my drug, and my drug dealer would come there. They just took care of me, right? Mm-hmm. And I went there. And I said to the bartender, I'm taking a break from my sobriety today. It's like at 4:30 on a Friday, something along those lines. And Monday came real quick. And I was supposed to be in San Francisco or something like that to speak to one of my investors about the state of the company that I was just torpedoing at that point. And I didn't make it, right? And I was like, man, how did that happen? This is something that I care about, supposedly. This is something that I really want. How did I fuck that up, right?
It's like something straight out of the Alcoholics Anonymous book, quote unquote.
I mean,
getting tight at just the right time.
Dude. And that was when I knew that I needed to go to treat this a little more seriously. But I still wasn't ready. It took about 2 weeks to find the perfect rehab for me because I was I was taking calls from people. I say I was acting like a blue chip prospect the way I was talking to these rehabs. They're just like, oh, what kind of scholarship are you going to offer me? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I always viewed it like this. I always viewed it like I said it just like last Saturday. I was like I wanted to dictate who was going to help me. Right?
Yeah.
I wanted the I was expecting Gandalf to come in and be like, "We're going to take you to your like something magical,"
I remember telling, the woman I was dating at the time, and was very familiar with, she knew what was happening with me, right? But that, I'm just looking for the VIP treatment, right? Mm-hmm. I need to I wanted to go someplace that rock stars went to. So I was very excited that I was going to talk to some person who helped Courtney Love get sober. And that person...
I need Dr. Drew. That's all there is to it. I know that's what I needed.
I still have a very bad resentment against Dr. Drew, which we will get to later. But that was still my mindset. I remember her saying it's just like, the part you're supposed to have humility with this situation. Like, that's for amateurs, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm going, aren't I? That's enough humility. But I finally found a place in Florida that was going to take me, that took my insurance, that it didn't have a stop date necessarily, so I could go there longer than 30 days if necessary. And I kept missing the planes. And a couple days beforehand, I was really just at my wit's end, and I was in my apartment in Williamsburg, Brooklyn,
just
by
you
myself.
Doing this setup? Because you talk about like, making phone calls or whatever. Was it just, did you have somebody helping you? Like, how does
I had a kind of like a broker, right? I was introduced to, who was taking my insurance and shopping. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And she, took my insurance and would call me back and say, here's a bed that's open that you can go to in 2 days or whatever. And that was it. But I kept missing the flights, and I just didn't want to go, right? But I knew I had to go, but I didn't want to go. And it was like a Friday in October, and I used to love the smell of fall in New York, and because of just like the promise and the excitement of what that was to come, which was just like, Halloween parties and lots of late nights and drugs, and then the holidays would come.
Your FOMO was going off.
Dude, man, it was so, and I'm talking to like the intake counselor at this place, and he's calling me Albert the whole time because that's my given name. Okay. And he's like, you got to get on that plane, Albert. I mean, because I kept missing it and bumping it. And he had the little guy that was in the taxi to pick me up at the airport, and he kept having to call him back. And I was convinced that I could explain to him that I'm just not ready for this right now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And him saying to me, nobody is. So, right?
There's never a good time.
Never a good time. Yeah. And I went to a friend's that night after I was pretty, suicidal, like to the point where I was on the ledge, and I didn't live in a very high apartment. So I was just like, if I jump off of this, I'll probably just get paralyzed. And who needs that hassle, right? I don't want to be in rehab in a wheelchair.
I've often done the calculations. Yeah.
Dude. And so, but I was there. I was broken in every way you needed to be broken at that point. And I went to my friend's house, and he kind of watched me, right? And he gave me a beer, just because I had another flight booked at like 6 a.m. And he said to me, "It's like, it's okay if you're not ready to do this at this point." And I was like, so tired. I don't know if you've ever had those days where, say, you've been like fighting with your significant other or your parents, and you're just all screamed out, right? Mm-hmm. And just that emptiness.
It's like emotional hangover, really, is what it is.
And just sitting there on the couch with my arms folded, almost like in this vampire pose, ready, just like kind of just so withdrawn and tired. And I didn't finish the beer. Smoked a lot of cigarettes, went to bed. He got me up at 4 a.m. We took an Uber to JFK or maybe LaGuardia. I got on that flight to West Palm Beach, and it was the loneliest flight I think I'd ever taken.
Mm-hmm.
And what stood out for me was just, okay, I know most people show. I remember last time I showed up, and I told you about my urine sample, but I was pretty sober by that point. I'd at least abstinence wise, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had tapered off most of the drugs. I couldn't tell you the last time I did drugs before that, but the takeoff was so smooth, like that. And part of me is just like, man, please crash. But it was the smoothest takeoff I think I'd ever had. It's like we were floating. And 2.5 hour flight went way too quick. And the pilot came on as soon as we landed, or about to land. And it was just like, for those of you, welcome to West Palm Beach. It's going to be a beautiful day here in sunny South Florida. For those of you coming home, welcome home. For those of you on vacation, enjoy your vacation. And right then I was just like, God, I want to enjoy my vacation. I want to be the person who's enjoying their vacation.
Yeah, no welcome to rehab message. Gosh.
Dude, there was no welcome to rehab message. There should be. It's like, that's like rehab capital of the world, I think. But that feeling of just the coldness that I felt, the just wanting to go back home, and just I wasn't ready, but I got off, and it's the guy holding the sign, and I went to detox for a little while, and the lady's like, you don't have to be here that long, you got nothing in your system, too bad, just stay here, wait for the bed. And I forget which woman, someone who worked there said that they had had David Cassidy in the week before or something.
Again?
Well, it was right before he died. It was his
wow.
last, I think he passed away that January, right? And with that haunting final message to his daughter on his deathbed, which was
I never knew.
Oh man, you should read the story. I mean, it's just like there was a guy who got it way too late, and I think he said something along those lines. I wasted so much time. Right.
Yeah.
And I read about that after the fact, just because I needed that to stick in my head. But I was there, and did you went to a facility or no?
When I was 15, I did.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So, it beats you by. But no, I of course it didn't stick, just like you. It took me a while. Yeah.
And this is I was in a cozy rehab, right? It wasn't a country club. It was not gin poppin' prison. Right?
Yeah.
It wasn't. But walking into that situation in the middle of lunch, all these people, like 20 people are there who had been there for time and had established themselves, and having no one to talk to, and also just kind of trying to formulate a story that would be interesting to people the whole time. I couldn't do it. And going to bed that night, and I had roommates this time around, and they were young, and obnoxious.
They usually are.
And just sleeping in that bed the first night, and the guy next to me just like snoring, and I was thinking of just like that scene in early Shawshank where I was just like, man, just like, get me out of here, get me out of here. And I would sleep up like when I was back in my reality before I got there, and I always used to do this since I was a young kid. I would have to fall asleep on the couch with the television on. Right?
Yeah, me too.
And I tried to do that there, and they reported me. Like, you're not allowed to do that. right?
Because you needed the noise and the comfort of that, yeah?
I just think that they needed you to have a different set of rules and wake up at 6 a.m. and make your bed and go to the first thing. You know, I mean, there were rules to follow, right?
Yeah.
And I think they needed to make sure that people were there for the right reasons and were going to behave, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a little while. But yeah, after Halloween, I spent there. And I spent Halloween. It's like maybe my 10th day. And I knew that there was a party that I was really looking forward to attending back in Brooklyn. That was going to be just one of those blowout nights that I just, again, looked forward to because that was where my joy existed. And instead, I was watching a costume party in rehab. It was the lamest costume party you could ever imagine.
More surrealness. It just gets, I get it.
And the big, you were allowed to have 1 can of soda as your reward for the weekend. Yeah, I know. But just thinking, I was just like, I could, if I bust out of here now, I could get on a flight. I could probably be back home at 10 o'clock or something like that, 11. Party would be kicking into high gear, but then it dawned on me, would anyone want me there?
What made you think of that?
Because I think enough people knew that I was just like a fuck up who needed help at that point. So
the cat was out of the bag and everybody's kind of aware.
Oh man, yeah,
believe
me. I mean, there's like I said. I mean, I was not hiding anything and not hiding anything very well, and I was just physically starting to kind of have effects. I mean, my ankles were swelling. I mean, my gums were bleeding. I mean, I don't think I had a solid bowel movement in such a long time.
Yeah, I always say my first spiritual experience was my first bowel movement. My first solid one.
Jeez. I mean, just and it was, especially over the summer, I was wearing like this cardigan sweater all the time. It was hot in New York City, but that's where I felt safe in because I didn't want people to see how much weight I'd lost, right? Or how bad my skin had become, right? So that I was thinking, it was just like, if I show up, it's going to really darken the doorway of that party, right? And I didn't want that to happen, obviously, either. So, yeah, I mean, I stuck it out. I became kind of a rehab all-star, right? And I was the guy who was saying wise things, who the technicians kind of turned to as like, this is in my head, by the way, too. So I mean, who knows if this is true? I'm sure they've seen my type before.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember we had like one of those sort of activity breakout sort of rooms, and the woman who was teaching this particular class was showing a video off of YouTube that was it was a recording of David Foster Wallace reading his essay "This Is Water."
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I love that one. Actually.
Everybody loves that one.
Yeah.
So here's what I do. Is I pull this woman aside and say, he hung himself.
Yeah, he killed himself.
Is that really the message you want to see there? And she's looking at me like, oh, you're one of those, right?
I would have done the same thing, though. For fair measure.
What a fucking asshole, right? I mean, just like, oh, I get it. You read one book, maybe, right? Congratulations to you. But like I said, I mean, I was there through Thanksgiving, and I felt pretty good. I was eating great. I was working out a lot. I was feeling a little clearer, but I don't know if you had this problem when you were sober, but my emotional state, there were so many different things like pumping through me at that point. In recovery, I had one of those moments that seems pretty common right now, which is just like, oh, I remember this time when I was a little kid where I think the doctor touched me in a funny way, and that really fucked me up, right? So I was working through that sort of stuff, trying to figure out if that was real. Felt real time, felt like something had happened in that room when I was with that person. So that's obviously life-changing in its own way. And just stressing out about what I was coming home to. I was coming home to an empty apartment with a failing media company. And it was going to be Christmas time, and there were going to be all the media parties that I could no longer attend, right? And just that's where my head went right away. And I had this awful fight with my father when I got out, because they had a condo in Jupiter, Florida, which is around 10 miles from where I was staying in my rehab facility, right? And I was telling my parents about like this recovered memory that I had, trying to get some info from them about who was that person that you took me to? Why did you send me to this person? Why, like, was this guy a sleep doctor? Who the fuck was this guy? And my father had just had enough. And we got into a physical altercation in their house, and I held him over the couch by his throat, and I heard his prosthetic hip crack, right? As I was pushing him so hard. Yeah. And he's like, I'm not going to let you hurt your mother. And I left. And we didn't talk for a long period of time after that. But when I got home in Williamsburg in my apartment, it was around Christmas time, and I was smoking cigarettes by myself, and I was like, oh, well, I've been on the internet for a while. I want an essay to move me. I want to find a piece of writing that was going to so I typed into Google, I'm 50 days sober and I want to run into traffic, right? Just seeing what would come up. And it was a suicide hotline, more rehabs, and I think an AP story about Demi Lovato, right? Yeah. And I was just like, well, where do I find this thing that I'm looking to read, right? And that's probably the first kernel that kind of popped in my head, where I was just like, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was some place that had the stories that I wanted to read for how... No, I didn't want listicles about like how to get through your first Christmas sober or things along those lines. I wasn't looking at that.
What we do a lot in Sober Pod, yeah.
Well, but I was searching for the feelings that I had, right? I mean, I was looking for something like relatable to not only people that are in recovery, but to people who just felt like I felt, which was, as we established in the beginning, was this lonely, restless, alien feeling that I'm absolutely just, the most special person on earth, but also the biggest piece of shit in the center of the universe, as they say in their
my second sponsor would say, like, he was like better than, less than behavior, and he would say stuff like, it's like, and I figured it out. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a piece of shit, but I'm the best piece of shit that there is.
Best piece of shit, most interesting, most fascinating. I'm the best piece of shit. They're going to make movies about me, right?
Even though I'm a piece of shit, I am the best piece of shit.
Best piece of shit. But I couldn't find that thing that I was looking for. And it took about 3-4 months after the trial, after everything that had happened, all the public stuff. And a friend of mine introduced me to this Harper's story called The Drunks Club. And it was written by this writer named Clancy Martin. And I was blown away. If you haven't read that, I recommend everyone read it. It just... It hit all the spots that I was looking for that night. And I was like, I want more of this in the world. And, a few months after that, Edith Zimmerman, who does all the illustrations for The Small Bow, did her own comic about her own sobriety. That was just wonderful. And again...
Yeah, you do an episode on that on your own podcast as well.
Yeah. And, but I was like... Luckily, I got a grant from a crypto company, and I was one of like 9 publications that received a healthy grant. And first 2 people I hired were Clancy and Edith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we went from there. The money ran out real quick, but I knew I had something that I really wanted to do. Like I thought that I had found the thing that I was looking for that night, right? And I needed to figure out a way to keep it going. So, took 6 years, and I'm almost at a livable salary. It still takes a while. I mean, it's my work, it's my passion, it is my job, and it's my life. But it's not my recovery, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, that's small bow is not my recovery. My recovery is just like everyone else go. I do 12-step, I do therapy, I do meditation and journals and all those other things in order to keep me sober, right? But the small bow is my job too, right?
Mm-hmm. So as you started it, what was the I guess I know it's like ever evolving, right? But still, like, did you have the vision for the small bow,
Yes.
like before you got into it? Is that how that worked?
Yeah.
So you said, like, I want to do this,
Yes.
because I mean it has evolved a little bit. So so tell me about that. What was the reason for the vision? Why is it the way that it is?
In addition to a lot of the things that I did at Gawker and Deadspin and various other publications that were rotten and trying to get a lot of attention, good or bad in some ways, and
but you did do good on some levels with Gawker, if not feeding a media machine. Or whatever.
Sure, but I was good at hiring.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
well. I was good at hiring smart people who could write better than I could and could put the stories out in the world that I think most people wouldn't identify as me as being the architect of that sort of stuff as well.
I'm sure those people were thankful that they had a paycheck. I just want to say that.
No, they were. Look, it was a well-paying job by that point. It was a very established media company, so everyone was salaried and things along those lines.
Exactly.
But I knew what quality was, put it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I was familiar with enough with, I would say, the smart section of like the media community. I knew who those readers were, right? And those are the people I wanted to go after this time around, right? I wanted people to read this and be like, oh, this is actually impressive. That's egotistical of me and all those things, but I had a standard, right? Whereas before, there was a standard, but there was also me getting in the way, and I didn't want to get in the way this time around of this, right?
Yeah, and I just say, for me, I don't know if I said it up front or if I said it before the podcast began, but I really admire what you've done. I mean, the honest and earnest way that you express the content, the way that you get these interviews involved, and I'm sure it takes a lot of effort, and again, I even like the fact, after you've lost, your funding, you're still trying to, continue to do it through, donations and through your community and that kind of stuff. And that's where I really appreciate the effort, because, it'd be one thing to like have the funding and do that stuff. It's another thing to lose the funding and then still try to produce something that is worth, being a part of. And that's why I say I and it does shine through. It really does. So I just want to make sure that, everybody listening understands that, like, it's something I really admire about what you're doing, the way that you, that you put yourself out there. And again, I think one of the things that really comes across if you're binging the whole thing is that, you can tell that you're a seeker, right?
Sure.
That you've gone through this process and that you're still going through this process of like trying to, continue to seek, and that you're doing that so openly is such a beautiful thing. So I guess that kind of brings me to the question about what have you enjoyed most? What has been the most revealing about your participation in this way, just personally and in your community? Like, what has been some of the what fruits have fallen from this small bow tree?
Well, it really showed, I think, a lot of the problem spots that I still needed to work on. I'm going through this period right now, which is I'm living in a creatively abundant part of my life. Right, there's a lot of things happening with the small bow, and a lot of things happening in my freelance life. I'm so satisfied in a way that I've never been before. Right, yet so I feel that kind of manic energy of wanting to create and put more things out in the world and compete. And I'm noticing that there is no real way to turn that off in a way that doesn't dip instantly to rage, right? There's no middle here, right, for me. There's nothing, if someone is not doing exactly the thing that I want them to do exactly the way I want them to do it, I can feel that tension and rage, and I know what I'm doing, and I'm in charge here, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, isn't that weird that still exists, given all this sobriety and recovery and everything along the lines that I do, that part of me still exists. And that part of me, historically, was what I thought was what made me good at my job, was the ability to stick to what my vision was and disregard everyone else. That's not sober behavior.
So my self-centeredness is my superpower?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's a great way of putting it. Yeah. But I needed to recognize that as a fault now, that's something I need to work on. That I have to figure out a better way of doing this time around, or else I'm going to end up in the same place. I probably won't drink or use, but will I be deeply unhappy and alone and have people talk about me in a way that's not very favorable, or possibly just like torpedo. I'm using torpedo too. I hate myself. I hate myself when I repeat words. So I apologize to your audience right now that I'm such...
It'd be one thing if I said torpedo a lot, but I think it's balancing out.
So anyway, but I mean, I that's a lot of, that's a gift, right? I have to see that as something that I need that to be a God shot in this situation. I need that to say that, just like, okay, yeah, don't fuck this up, right? Mm-hmm. You're still capable of making a lot of people's lives like uncomfortable. You're capable of screwing up your own good thing. Part of me still wants to do that. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, no, I was the dude that loved blowing shit up. That's like how I got my my hit, right? You know, when we talk, and I noticed too, it's like you talk about somewhere in your podcast, and you talk about attending ACA, you talk about attending AA, you talk about extending all these other programs. To talk a little program speak, ACA, like I started doing that about 4.5 years ago, and it was because of all the same things that you're talking about right now, which is I got sober, but all those things are still there. And what is that driving that part of me? And dude, I was always a dude, like if I started something and I was bored, or I just thought, you know what, like I don't, maybe I'm losing control of this. My essence is to say, like, my best way to control something is to cause chaos, right? Because if I can't control it
perfectly,
I will cause the chaos that causes the lack of control, right? Because that way I have control if I'm causing chaos.
So, I'm looking at this. I just got a whole bunch of email stuff of just like things to do via my my partner in kind of building out the small bow business, and I'm like, fuck you. And he's not saying anything like,
it's not personal.
Nothing at all there. Yeah, but that's where my head goes to. Just like, do you know what I'm doing right now? Do you know all the things that I have to do today?
Yeah. I got to talk to this fucking guy.
But it's like, after this, the reason why I wanted to do this earlier was because I take jujitsu, and jujitsu has become the good part of my recovery, and helping me with a lot of these other feelings that I'm just discussing, right? And so I want to do that, and then I'm like, but if I do that, right, is that a selfish act? And is that going to kind of cause some problems for everyone else in the day? And I'm discovering right in real time that I should maybe not attend today. And I will do something else because there are people who need me more today, right? And I have to show up for that. Which I have to show up for that. That is a period at the
plain
end.
Plain and simple.
Yeah. I'm glad that we got to work through I get to show off my recovery muscles on your show. So
yeah, in real time. Yeah. So I guess talking about like AA, ACA, and all the other 12-step and therapy and like all these other things, what do you think has probably been the most impactful for you? Because listening to your show, I'm like, all right, this dude has kind of crossed a lot of therapy boundaries, right? So you've done a lot of the inner work, you've done a lot of the family work, obviously you've gone to therapy on some level. So where do you find like you've achieved like the most, I guess, transformation? Like where do you think that has happened?
Oh, I'm so excited to answer this question. Honestly, it's I go to an ACA men's meeting on Fridays, right? At this
I also attend a men's, not a men's, but an ACA on Fridays. Yeah.
It's this beautiful Theosophist church that's up the street from where we live, and I've been going there for 5.5 years now. I originally went into it because I thought it was a men's stag AA meeting, right? Not knowing anything about ACA.
Just wandering with the group. Is that how it happened?
There was like 40 guys in there, and they were, I live in LA. A lot of them look like actors, and I remember them being dressed really well, and I was just like, I wonder what's going to happen in this meeting. And every single man that shared that day was exactly what I needed to hear. And I was like, I didn't know these meetings exist. Like these guys, like they passed the basket around. I think they were like $45 over. Like, I mean, everybody was in it and respectful and service. And it was just like, I could sense that there's something in this room that I really want and I really need. And I think I went in there with the story in my head that, I needed to fix my relationship with my parents, and I needed to fix my relationship to the women in my life that I've dated and been rotten to. And I needed to fix what was happening in my life with my job. And I realized in that room, I needed to fix my relationship with men. Right?
Yeah, good deal.
That I was in there and recognizing just, oh man, I'm acting differently to get these guys to like me. I'm dressing differently. I'm waking up early to make sure that these guys like me and don't think I'm a pussy. And I'm like formulating my shares in my head beforehand just so I can I had people in my head. I was just like, if I make this guy laugh, I'm going to be accepted, right? And I recognized it just like, that is the only environment that I do that in. And just think of just how much that really can screw up who you are and how much stuff that is just how damaging that is, right? So I really became honest about what my needs were, right? Because I didn't know I was allowed to need anything. And my boundary problems and all of these big things that can that absolutely screw up myself and my relationships to other people. I found that in that room, right? Not necessarily the ACA program, but the way that those men were using that ACA program was super impressive and useful to me. And I treat AA as I go to AA for other people who are trying to get sober, right? I feel like that's part of my service. It's almost like I have to get recertified every single year in order to kind of, qualify as an alcoholic.
That's great. And carrying member,
for sure. As I believe in the power of that program 100%. But ACA is where my emotional sobriety really got fixed, and I got into that. My
head came out of my ass when I started doing the ACA work, and I did that in 2020. And I actually went and started. That's when I worked through all the ACA steps, and I spent.
Did
a lot
you do
of
the
time.
blueprint for progress? like the
No,
4
I did
or
the
5?
yellow workbook.
Okay, but there's
Yeah.
there's a blueprint for progress that is like their 4th and 5th step workbook there. It took me 2 years
Oh.
to do it.
Yeah, it
And
took me a year and a half to get through all that stuff.
yeah, and I mean, when I got done that, I was like, I'm going to buy a billboard and to let everyone know.
And you did, right? You did.
Oh, man, I did.
For
Yeah,
the
right.
small
Sorry.
bow.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, early on when we had funding.
Yeah.
I always
Would you-
feel terrible that, I mean, I was just like, yeah, that was probably, that $10,000 probably could have been used more.
Could have used differently, but
Yeah,
you know,
for
for the one person that referenced it, I think
Yeah.
it's great. You did an article and you said you bought this billboard. And it was and then like your return was
one
like
subscriber
one
for
subscriber.
like 2 weeks. Yeah. Yeah.
They read
But
a couple of articles, but hey, it probably helped them. Probably
I
changed.
mean,
their lives.
I keep going back to the good part about like having a billboard and they take pictures of it. You can use it on Instagram in perpetuity, right?
I mean, but I could have just mocked one up for you, honestly. You know,
Right.
so
But I would know it wasn't real. I think everyone else would know it wasn't real.
True.
Um,
So when you talk about emotional sobriety and physical, so I think it's really great because the fact is like what I really am, I guess, turned on by with the small bow is that it is a lot of emotional sobriety. It is a lot of that stuff that, really it's that. Yeah, it basically works to deter the path back to relapse or the path back to emotional relapse, for that matter. I really enjoy the topics that are coming up and the way that you kind of dig into them. It's very earnest and honest and it's personal.
Yeah.
So I when talking about being of service to this title of this podcast, of course, is the small bow, but this is still Sober Pod, right?
Yes.
So when we're talking to the newcomer, a lot of our audience are 30, 60, 90 day people, right?
Nice.
It turns over pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then we have a good chunk that are return long-term listeners. And I don't know why they listen, but they are long-term listeners. But and I hope that they find you and that they explore the journey more into what is, I feel, is like real recovery, right? So that you're kind of working on the things that.
What
really,
does that? So
impact
can you
you.
define that for me? Like real recovery?
So there's abstinence-based physical recovery,
Okay.
that kind of
That's
stuff,
what
or
I
even
figured. Yeah.
medical assisted recovery.
Sure.
It's like great, it's like wonderful, good stuff. I put down put the plug in the jug and I put the pipe down. Great, wonderful. But the things that are
You're still an asshole.
Yeah,
That's
you're
what you discovered.
still a fucking jerk. Nobody likes you, right?
Nope.
Yeah. And for me, I knew that I was for a very long time, but I didn't really understand. I needed to address the core causes of Carl's concerns, right? What makes me tick a little bit more,
Yeah.
And I didn't know any of that stuff, and I wasn't prepared to look at that stuff until I was ready, until I had some sobriety. So talking about the 30, 60, 90-day person, what would you say to that 30, 60, 90-day person who's just, getting their feet wet and getting into recovery?
Geez, what would I say? I mean, I always try to respect people exactly where they are, and that I think that the one day at a time thing is such a cliche, but it is also the only thing that is accessible at that point. Mm-hmm. Nothing is going to change overnight. Like, just going back to my original story about that 9 days I spent in detox, thinking that it was like 1,000 days because that's what it felt like. And it wasn't. It was 9, right? This is hard. I think that everyone has to realize that this is very difficult, that your life is going to be reordered, and it's supposed to be that way, right? But find your community. It doesn't have to be a whole group of people, but find the place that you feel safe, find the place that you feel loved, find the place where you feel like that there's someone in that room that has the thing that you want, And mm-hmm. I think that is really the job to be done here. I mean, just obviously, put down whatever you're putting in your body, but I don't believe that it's just. I think you have to do more than just show up. I really do. Unfortunately, I know that like a lot of people just say, yeah, just get there and sit there. But after a while, you have to start to listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the willingness to listen, I think, is even more important than the willingness to share.
Yeah, I always try to encourage dudes when I'm talking to them on the sidewalk after their third, day sober or whatever. I really try to encourage them to, when they're attending meetings, basically, is to make sure that they can sit in a place in the room where they can look people in the eyes, right? Because they need to be able to feel what that person is saying, right? Yeah, I know. It's like
that's crazy talk, man.
But that really does get you involved, right? It really does get you to start caring about that person on the other, sitting in the other chair, So
well, I don't know what to, because again, I'm trying to access all of the feelings that I had in early recovery, and I don't know how different they are from the ones I have now, right? I think that's part of this. Is just like I've definitely had joyful moments in sobriety that I never thought possible. The promises, as they say, right? I've had those things, but I still have the same shit inside me that got me in a lot of trouble and that I was trying to escape the whole time. Now I have tools, so to speak. Now I have people to talk to, and that's the only thing that worked for me, right? That's it.
I say, what do they say? Like, pause when agitated, kind of a thing. It's one of those tools. But I think that in early sobriety, the time between that pause is definitely a lot shorter. So it's like, I'm just more immediate, more raw, and honestly, I should probably just sit down and shut the fuck up most of the time in my early sobriety.
It's so important to say nothing.
Yeah,
that is such a gift that people kind of just like do not receive willingly. But I have to accept that as a gift, right?
Yeah.
Every single day. When I get that moment where it's just like, oh, I really want to say something smart and important that's going to change people's lives, but also give me exactly what I want. Or I could say nothing. Nothing seems to feel better.
I have learned, again, because I'm the one that likes to blow stuff up. I'm the one that likes to create the excitement. They love putting me in a boardroom and pitching work, etc., because I'm entertaining in that way. But let me just say, and I think that's where I sometimes feel like my edge, quote unquote, got smoothed out, because I think it all day long. If you say it, my brain thinks it. I want to immediately say it, but I don't do that anymore, and I love that part of me. I love how that works out. Okay, we're going to get on to a different topic, but I just want to make sure that I checked in and made sure that we were addressing the newcomer. Hey, is there? I really want to encourage people to go and listen to The Small Bow and go to thesmallbow.com. And I know that you have subscriptions there. You have free articles there as well.
Oh,
and
of course.
And you have the podcast. The one thing I really wanted to do, and I'm going to continue to do it until you tell me not to, is basically you have meetings as well. We didn't really talk about that, but you have meetings. And so we used to have a meeting that was secretaried and hosted. It was kind of like our official meeting of SoberPod, and I'd like to ask you on camera on this recording: will the Small Bow be the official meeting of SoberPod so that we can promote your meetings?
Is that what you want to do? Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to be able to make.
We are not, and this is like, we are a meeting that is absolutely open to everyone, right? I mean, we don't really stick to it's more a general mental health check-in meeting, right? There are people that are abstinent from drugs and alcohol and who struggle with that, and then there are people who just struggle, right? And are searching, are still trying to figure out what's wrong with them, right? And that's really what our community offers, that I think has been very unique and very rewarding for people. Yeah, so if that sounds like something, please come on.
Yeah, and I want to point out, Monday and Wednesday, you have meetings. You have Thursday, you have a women and non-binary meeting. And then Friday you have that's again, it's an open meeting. And these aren't like AA meetings. These aren't like structured in that way, right? Like
it's a Zoom. I mean, we we have an intro that says we rip off most of their format, right? in the sense
but
that
it's not an official AA meeting or anything like that.
Not at all.
And then Saturday you have a mental health focus, and it's peer support for bipolar, anxiety, and depression, right? And then Sunday you have mental health and sobriety support group.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that people understand that when this is, it much better than our official meeting. We only had one official meeting on Saturday.
Yeah.
So this way, you can find your meeting, find your group within the group, and go there and attend. And if you can make it. That would be awesome. Love to see everybody there. I plan on attending, a few myself. So I just want to make sure that.
Wednesdays and Fridays are kind of Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays are the most. That's like usually 15 to 20 people go to those meetings.
So what can you expect out of those meetings when you go?
You can lurk and you can listen and you can have a bunch of people say, like the last one that was in last Wednesday, the topic was, I think that's something we got on, like, everything's going well right now. Why do I want to blow it up? Right. That was
a perfect meeting for me.
And it was what I needed that day, right? And everyone shared, right? I mean, we usually don't have a meeting where there's not anyone. If people don't like the topic, it's just a general check-in, right? We do that. The topic is like prompt may work for some people, but most of the time it's just a check-in.
That's wonderful. Well, is there anything else that you would that I didn't ask you or that you didn't talk about that you'd like to mention?
Carl, I could spend here all day talking about myself. I don't know if you've realized that at this point, man. This could be a 4-hour show, but I won't do that. So, because like I said, at 11 or 10 minutes from now, I should get off of here.
No, yeah, you're done.
Thanks for other people,
dude. I really want to thank you for taking this time. Honestly, I know that you're a busy dude, and I know that you got stuff going on in your life. And I mean, you got a lot of moving parts, which is wonderful. Not only do you have like all this recovery stuff and your freelance and whatever else you got going, you got a family too,
3 children, 2 dogs,
exactly,
a wife,
so many things. But
a pet lobster.
Dude. That's awesome.
Chompy, it's a crayfish, but it was advertised as a Mexican mini lobster. But it's a crayfish. Yeah, so.
It's crawdad. Is it crawdad?
It is.
Yeah, cool. All right, brother. Well, I just wanted to thank you again, and by all means, everybody, please go and listen and subscribe to and put your emails in and visit those meetings on thissmallbow.com. And of course, the links will be in the show notes for all the other stuff.
Great.
So thank you again. What do you say to the kind, lovely people out there, AJ?
I say,
what's your sign off?
Okay, you want to hear what our sign off is on
what's
the
your
official Small Bow meetings?
Yeah, what is it?
And this was, I put this in there because I was watching a lot of it over the pandemic, but I do Clear Eyes, Full Hearts, Can't Lose from Friday Night Lights. That is our serenity prayer.
Yeah. And then I say, stay active, stay sober. See ya.
Soberpod.com. Yeah. It was a sight to see him. Breakfast with Sprite and Seagrams. Wrestling with my vices, exercising my demons. My blessings were blocked, so I never got the message. I'm stressing, I'm only 12 steps from an exit. Regret it, because my imperfections were perfected. I ain't run from it, I accept it and rep it. It's a badge to me, good stories come from a tragedy. And when you survive, the glory will come in Act 3. The wait's over, 366 days sober. Morning affirmations that can start the day for you. Use my favorite bookmark for a placeholder. Finish when the day's over. Okay. Yeah, sober pod, keep it authentic, no facades. If it's real, then you know it's ours. Welcome.